Some people speak so eloquently, reason so brilliantly. They can explain every concept, cite all kinds of books, and even make others believe they're on a higher plane of wisdom. Their words seem to come from a vast database of knowledge, but they don't live them. On the other hand, there are those who speak little, who don't seem to know much. Yet a single sentence, a glance, or the way they live can leave us speechless. It's as if something within us has just been awakened. True wisdom, therefore, isn't measured by the quantity of knowledge, but by the depth of the life within. In an age overflowing with information, the difference between knowing and seeing becomes ever more crucial. Knowing is accumulation, seeing is awakening. Knowing can be copied, seeing cannot be conveyed. Knowing belongs to the mind, but seeing belongs to an awakened spirit. And it's in that very place that true wisdom begins to unfold. Why do some people study their whole lives yet remain trapped in ignorance? And why do others, who've never read a single book of philosophy, live with profound understanding and compassion? The answer lies in the very nature of wisdom and its levels. Each of us lives, thinks, and acts from a certain level of wisdom, and that level determines what we see, what we understand, and how we live. In today's video, let's journey together with Stillman Path through the 5 levels of wisdom. This isn't a theory, nor a ranking system. It's a way for you to locate where you are on your inner journey. Not to add another thing to remember, but to see what's truly listening within you right now. At which level of wisdom is it resonating? The first level, borrowed wisdom, is where most of us begin. This is the stage where our understanding is entirely based on what others have said, written, or taught. At this point, our knowledge doesn't come from lived experience, but from memorizing, repeating, and copying. It's like a mirror reflecting light from another source, yet never emitting anything of its own. People at this level are easily swayed by things that sound right or profound, especially if they come from someone famous or are quoted from a well-known book like the Bible. They might speak about love, enlightenment, selflessness, or the nature of God, but everything they say comes from the outside. They're not speaking from a place they've walked through, but from where others have stood. They know many things about the truth, but they've never lived in that truth. A telltale sign of this level is their tendency to quote others. They cite philosophers, scientists, saints, or any figure who seems greater than themselves. There's a constant need within them to prove they're right by leaning on the authority of external knowledge. But this very clinging is proof they haven't yet touched the truth with their own hands and heart. They believe understanding is enough, unaware that understanding without seeing, without living, is still a barrier between them and their true selves. People at this level often fall into the illusion that they've seen and understood deeply because they can say profound things. Others admire them, so they think they've reached a higher level of wisdom. But in reality, they're lost in a maze of words. They repeat lofty phrases without realizing those words are mere signposts, not the reality itself. They think they're moving forward, but they're really just running in circles around an idea. Someone at the borrowed wisdom level is like a person learning to swim by reading a book about swimming. They can tell you about different strokes, the physics of buoyancy, even the anatomy of the human body in water. But if you push them into the lake, they'll flail in panic. And the saddest part is, the more they know, the more they fear admitting they've never truly known. No one is at fault for being at this level. It's a necessary part of the journey. But if we don't dare to look back, If we don't dare to admit the borrowed nature of our understanding, we risk turning knowledge into a prison and wisdom into an illusion. Only when we see clearly that we're repeating what others have said do we have a chance to start listening to the voice within. The place where true wisdom can begin to sprout. The second level, reflective wisdom, marks a pivotal shift in this journey of awareness. It's no longer about accumulating information from the outside, but the beginning of an encounter with your own inner world. This is the moment when you start to doubt what you've believed to be true. You no longer immediately trust what you've heard, learned, or repeated from the past. But unlike impulsive rebellion, this reflection doesn't come from defiance. It arises from a quiet, deep, and persistent inner restlessness. People at this level may still learn from books or others, but now they pause in their absorption. That pause, though small, is the first sign that true wisdom is beginning to take shape. They no longer take in everything like a recording device. They start to ask, is this real? Does this align with my lived experience? Who within me is believing this, and why do I believe it? This shift often comes with inner conflict, because they must face the possibility that the beliefs they've held for so long, beliefs tied to their identity, their past, their family, their faith, or their ideologies, might just be a shell. Truth is no longer a simple right answer. It becomes a matter of life and death, and they can no longer feel at peace living on untested beliefs. Reflective wisdom opens the door to self-inquiry, a process where the ego begins to crack. People stop being lenient with themselves. They see that they can be intelligent yet easily self-deceived. They can argue sharply, but fear facing the unflattering truths about themselves. They begin to examine the hidden motives behind their actions, realizing they believe something not because it's true, but because it feels safe. This seeing humbles them. No one can reach a higher level of wisdom without passing through this stage. It's the foundation of all awakening, whether in philosophy, psychology, or meditation. It's the first light, faint though it may be, that begins to shine into the hidden corners of the mind. And once this light is ignited, you can no longer live in pretense. You may not yet know what the truth is, but you begin to smell the scent of falsehood, especially from within yourself. Reflective wisdom doesn't bring peace, it makes you uneasy. But it's the kind of unease necessary to leave the comfort zone of delusion. It doesn't give you answers, but it awakens a kind of inner honesty. And that honesty is the first seed of freedom. When you stop being lenient with the beliefs you carry, that's when true wisdom begins to take root. The third level, self-reliant wisdom, is where knowledge, reflection, and lived experience start to crystallize into a kind of understanding that no longer depends on words. If the previous two levels still clung to the outside or wrestled with reflective doubts, at this level, wisdom begins to reside deeply within the body and spirit. The things you once heard, read, or doubted have either fallen away or been tested through profound, real-life experience. People at this level no longer rush to share what they know, not because they're reserved, but because they understand some things cannot be conveyed through words. Every lived experience, every pain they've endured, every failure or letting go, leaves behind a layer of sediment. And from that sediment, a kind of wisdom, distinct from mere intellect, is formed. It doesn't sit on the tip of their tongue, but rests quietly in their gaze, in the way they face suffering, in the way they listen to another without interrupting. Self-reliant wisdom isn't something that can be shown off. It doesn't dazzle like intellectual brilliance or sparkle like eloquent speech, but it carries a unique weight, a weight that comes not from authority or credentials, but from being fully present in each moment of life. People with self-reliant wisdom are no longer easily swayed by surface-level right or wrong, by praise or criticism, by the temptations of knowledge. They see a person not through their education or words, but through the quality of their life, whether they truly live what they say or are merely playing a sophisticated role. Another sign of this level is a clear distinction between what's real and what's false. They don't need much reasoning to discern who speaks from truth and who speaks from memory. This discernment doesn't come from experience or technique, but from a refined sensitivity in their spirit. They hear what lies beyond words. They see what has never been spoken, because they've walked through those same twists and turns themselves. They've hurt, they've shattered, they've lost everything, and they've seen that everything is just a temporary cloak over the real. Self-reliant wisdom doesn't strive to be intelligent or to impress. It simply exists, and from that existence, everything else becomes clear, simple, and profound. Someone at this level might stay silent through an entire conversation, but with one well-timed sentence. All the noise fades away. They don't need to prove anything, because their presence itself is proof of what they've seen. If borrowed wisdom is light from the outside, and reflective wisdom is light shining inward, self-reliant wisdom is a steady flame burning from within, warm enough to comfort, but strong enough to burn away any remaining falsehood. This is the level where words and life begin to merge, where there's no longer a gap between what you understand and how you live. And that's what makes people at this level trustworthy, even if they don't try to convince anyone. The fourth level, egoless wisdom, is where the vision is no longer distorted by the need to affirm the self. This is no longer the wisdom of an individual seeking to be right. It's the seeing of a spirit that has let go of the shadow of I am. At this level, people no longer see themselves as the center, nor do they use knowledge as a tool to win, to influence, or to embellish their image. This transformation doesn't come from an effort to suppress the ego through willpower, but from a deep seeing of the ego's nature, or as an illusion formed by memories, habits, reactions, and the need to exist. When this is seen clearly, the mind no longer needs to defend anything called me. And from there, every thought, feeling, and action begins to carry a deeper authenticity, untainted by personal motives. Egoless wisdom doesn't care about right or wrong by societal or intellectual standards. It cares about what's truly real. People at this level can listen to a debate without needing to interject, not because they lack arguments, but because they see clearly what's at play beneath the surface. They see the ego craving recognition, fighting to sustain its idea of itself, while others are still arguing. They've already seen the entire mechanism of the mind at work, and this makes them deeply quiet. At this level, people no longer cling to any ideology, be it religious, philosophical, or scientific. They may use those languages to communicate, but they no longer identify with any system. They've seen that all ideologies are products of time, culture, and collective consciousness. All and thus, nothing is absolute. They live in a freedom that doesn't oppose anyone or reject anything, because they're no longer confined by any framework of rightness. Egoless wisdom often comes with a kind of inner silence, not a silence of restraint, but a natural silence when there's no need to perform. They observe what others react to, they recognize what others analyze, and where others cling to logic, they see the subtle workings of cause and effect, not because they try to understand through spirituality, but because their mind has become transparent to reality. People at this level of wisdom often make others feel lighter, even without doing anything special. They don't convince anyone, but their presence alone can illuminate without words. They no longer need to be heard, but when they speak, their words carry a quiet precision. Not the kind that sounds impressive, but the kind that cuts straight to the hidden core, because there's no one left in them to elevate or protect. All they're seeing becomes free and unbiased. Egoless wisdom is like a still lake. It doesn't try to reflect, yet everything that approaches is seen clearly. And it's this very lack of effort that makes their seeing so profound. With no ego in the way to interpret, things are seen as they truly are, neither added to nor diminished. And in that vision, all concepts dissolve, leaving only the pure movement of reality. The final level, wordless wisdom, is where even the concept of wisdom itself dissolves. Here, there's no one left to know, and nothing left to be known. All attempts to explain, describe, or analyze become unnecessary because reality doesn't need a name to exist. In its purest presence, it's complete without any I standing in between to affirm it. People at this level no longer live through thought, not because they reject thinking, but because thought is no longer the center that drives them. They become like a silent space where every phenomenon arises and fades without leaving a trace. They no longer try to understand anything, because they've seen that the very effort to understand creates a gap between themselves and life. When the ego falls silent, truth rings out, not in words, but through direct presence. Wordless wisdom doesn't oppose ignorance, nor does it sit at the peak of cleverness. It transcends every duality. There's no longer a distinction between right and wrong, light and dark, enlightenment or delusion. Every polarity dissolves into a whole and complete seeing. People at this level no longer see themselves as practicing, understanding, or growing. They simply live fully in each moment. They might work, talk, laugh, eat, or wash dishes like anyone else, but deep within, there's no center directing or controlling their actions. There are no questions like, is this right? What should I say? What do others think of me? Because the me has dissolved into everything. And when there's no separate self, every action flows purely, simply, and effortlessly. People at this level often seem very ordinary. They might even be mistaken for having nothing special about them. They don't say lofty things. They don't present themselves as knowers. They don't try to stand out. But if you stay near them long enough, you'll feel a deep stillness, a presence as light as the wind yet as clear as sunlight. It carries no agenda, but is always fully there. They don't need your admiration or acknowledgement, because there's no one left in them to need validation. Wordless wisdom cannot be achieved through practice or effort to surpass the previous levels. It only reveals itself when all striving ceases, when every desire to be wise, every effort to be enlightened, every label of the self dissolves in absolute surrender. Only then can what has always been present be seen, not with the eyes, not with the mind, but through the silent emptiness of being. If we must use an image, wordless wisdom is like the light of the sun. It doesn't choose where to shine. It doesn't set a purpose. It doesn't need anyone to acknowledge its light. It simply exists, and that existence is the light. People at this level are the same. They're no longer someone who knows, but the knowing itself, no longer someone who sees, but the seeing itself, boundless, unbound, wordless. After walking through these 5 levels of wisdom, what remains isn't a new definition or a system of knowledge to memorize or use later. What remains is a quiet question echoing within you. Where am I living from? from an ego that accumulates knowledge, or from a clear mirror with nothing left to defend. Each level of wisdom has its reason for existing. None is wrong. But if we linger too long at one level, life begins to calcify, and we become trapped in the very understanding we once thought was truth. Some are stuck at borrowed wisdom, thinking they've seen. Some are trapped at reflective wisdom, believing they're awake. Some stop at self-reliant wisdom and turn it into a standard to judge others. Even at the egoless level, if there's still a notion of egolessness, the shadow of the ego remains. Only when we step into wordless wisdom, where there's no one stepping, no one understanding, do we see that wisdom isn't something to accumulate, but what remains when there's nothing left to cling to. There's no I as the seer, no that as the seen, just pure seeing, without purpose or form, yet the foundation of a life lived awake and free. So the question isn't which level you've reached, but whether you're living from that truth. Do you dare to stay silent before what you haven't truly seen? Do you dare to let go of the knowledge that once propped you up? Do you have the courage to not need to become anyone, to not need to understand anything anymore, and simply live fully in what is? Wisdom isn't for display, for debate, or for convincing others. If wisdom is truly wisdom, it will make you live more simply, more authentically, with less explanation but more presence. It will lead you away from the noise of knowledge and into the stillness of a nameless knowing. And if, after this journey, you can sit back, relax your mind a little, and listen to the sound of what's alive within you, then perhaps true wisdom has begun to gently touch you, not through concepts, not through philosophy, but through the unconditional presence of being. Thank you for joining Stoicmind on this journey. We'll see you in the next video, and as always, we wish you and your loved ones abundant health and peace.